you are processed to be a minister of state, and you focus on that.
But you have some members of parliament who are not just ministers. They are ministers, they are members of boards, they have international obligations, and so on. How does that come about? Is it because we don't have enough qualified people in the country?
No. We do have more than enough qualified people. It's just the system that we run in. That is why I served in those positions. When I was a minority leader and majority leader, leader of parliament, I was a member of the Parliamentary Service Board. That is what the system says it should be. I also had the opportunity to serve as the chairman of Civil Aviation Board and various boards. In fact, as an ordinary member of parliament, I was a member of the board of directors of Ghana Ports and Harbour Authority. By the same law, I also served as a member of the Media Commission, and then while serving in these positions, I represented the country in many international bodies. In fact, I was at the World Parliament, the Interparliamentary Union, and I was the vice president representing Africa on a number of committees. I also belong to the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption. In fact, the founding member, together with my colleague, the minority leader now, Oseche Mensah Bonsu, we moved the motion for its adoption in the Canadian Parliament. I was also a member of the African Parliamentary Network Against Corruption, very active member at that. And so with all this, how could one ever be very effective in any of them? It's not practicable. And I think that we need to go beyond the general concept that we know about democracy, be very clear in our minds as to what we want, and come out with details. That's one of the areas. Because when you talk to people, they say, but the Constitution says there's a provision on conflict of interest. What does that mean? Conflict of interest is defined differently from country to country. We need to legislate to come out with not just acts, but also instruments detailing specifically what we mean by a conflict of interest. And though that is left to the general understanding or perception of people, and that is not helping us.
So we're going to go for a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation on Parliament. One of the issues which has become very controversial is the issue of lobbying within Parliament. And I'd like us to spend some time looking at lobbying in Parliament, whether it's a useful thing or not. So, short break. Hello, welcome back to Hot Issues, and we are in conversation with the Honorable Bagbin. He is a member of a committee appointed by the President to supervise some projects. We'll come to that later. He's a very distinguished member of Parliament. He's been in Parliament for 6 terms, used to be the minority leader, has been a minister, and has a wealth of international experience. We're talking about Parliament. So the issue of lobbying in Parliament was raised by you, and it became very controversial. What is the issue?
Lobbying is a process of people convincing Parliament to act in a way that will provide a good condition for them to operate. For example, you have the private sector, and the private sector has a number of players. In one of the areas, let's talk about imports and exports. The traders are meeting some challenges, and those challenges might be as a result of the legal framework that we have adopted. The traders could come to Parliament get particularly the Committee on Trade and Industry empowered to understand in practical terms the effects and outcomes of the laws that we have passed. They could do that by comparing what we have with other countries, or by just sharing their experiences with the parliamentary committee. And with that knowledge, the parliamentary committee could get the executive, in fact, and that is the wrong thing to do here in Ghana, where we as parliamentarians have to depend on the executive to initiate laws. You see, but in other parliaments, the parliamentarians themselves could constitute leadership that will initiate the drafting of legislation and then bring that legislation to be passed on the floor of Parliament to improve the legal framework. And so lobbying involves partly convincing Parliament, building the capacity of Parliament to do what is right in the view of the people. There is some wrong perception about lobbying. People think lobbying is about taking money and buying the conscience of members of Parliament to do what they want. That is not lobbying. The laws on lobbying are very clear as to what a lobbyist could do, as to what a member of Parliament could do in those circumstances. Fortunately, we are now, as a country, detailing out issues of rules of ethics and code of conduct of office holders, public office holders, whether it's in the executive or in public service or in the legislature. And in fact, we have a committee now chaired by me detailing out the rules of ethics and code of conduct for members of Parliament. What are the do's, what are the don'ts for parliamentarians? And so lobbying is quite an important area of democratic participation, where the people that you represent are able to come and get the opportunity to make inputs into whatever Parliament or the executive is doing. It's not only Parliament they lobby, and they do this with the object of making sure that the common interest is better served. It's not just the few elected people who sit in the house and decide what Ghanaians want. So that is lobbying.
But if this is all you said, why did it become such a controversy?
Well, because we've not been able to explain it for people to understand. And so, as I said, the perception is that, oh, what is he talking about? Just because some people think that when they come to Parliament, and this is where my interaction with the civil society group in Koforidua led to the publication of a sentence I stated, that MPs take bribe, which was exactly not what I said. People think that to lobby a member of Parliament is to come to Parliament, give some money to the member of Parliament and say, go and do this for me. And so when they heard me talking about lobbying, and then people said, no, what is he talking about? Lobbying is part of democratic practice. And you cannot, and I mean it, you cannot have effective participation of the people without giving them such opportunities to be able to organize properly, to make inputs in legislation or representation.
When we come back, we will continue our conversation with Mr. Alban Kingsford Sumana Bagbin, Member of Parliament and a very, very prominent citizen. And when we get back, we shall be looking at the national situation, the so-called economic crisis, how we can get out of it, and how the political establishment can address the needs and aspirations of the people of Ghana. Short break. Hello, welcome back to Hot Issues. We are in conversation with the Honorable Alban Kingsford Bagbin, and we are discussing Parliament, but we just want to shift a little to the national situation. Is it true that this country is going through an economic crisis?
Well, let me state that what we are experiencing now is an accumulation of our performance as a country, and it's not the creation of President John Mahama or the government of the day. Only what we expected is that his leadership should take us through these problems successfully, and for us to recapture some of the things that we have lost. Downgrading of our economy, and so if your economy is downgraded from B plus to B, if your import cover has moved from, let's say, about 2 months or 3 months import cover to 2 weeks, and even in some cases they are saying 10 days import cover. If you're not being able to release monies for one very important arm of government, let's say the judiciary, even Parliament, and even the executive itself to function, depending on what you want to term it. Some may say we are having serious challenges, and some may term it we are in a crisis situation. And looking at the general dissatisfaction in the country, I am tempted to agree with some of these things that I've told you, that we are in a crisis situation. If we don't acknowledge where we are or who we are, it will be difficult for us to be able to craft the right policies to get out of there. That is a problem. And so we must first admit that this is where we are. Then what can take us out of where we are? And together with those that will agree with us, who will be prepared to support us, we will put our shoulders together and put in place some policies and some processes that can quickly get us of this problem. One of the challenges we have is that our development partners seem to have lost trust for us. And so since 2012, they should have supported our budgets with a little bit over $600 million. They haven't done that. They are holding back. What is the reason? They used to do it. Why are they not doing it now? And so you see that there is a problem. And they are looking at us. How are we gearing up? How are we positioning ourselves to solve the problem? If they see that we're taking serious measures, they see that we're making sacrifices, not doing the business as we used to do, then they will come in. In fact, I have proposed a number of just the initial policy changes we could make to give confidence to people, even Ghanaians. For example, housing policy, okay, vehicle policy. If you see in this country, particularly in the public sector, we have more Land Cruisers than cars. And these Land Cruisers, all of us are caught in it. I use a Land Cruiser, you know. We use them in Accra. The cost to the nation is colossal. Could we decide to pool them? And so that when one has to go, an official has to take a trip outside Accra or for a long distance, then you can go for that vehicle, and after that you put it in a pool. And then we all use cars. The excess Land Cruisers that we have, we can auction them out. I proposed this last year, early last year, but I could see the challenges. This year, Italy is doing that. Okay? In housing policy, we're just following the colonial masters who came from somewhere and had to be given bungalows. Okay? So after they left, we took over. And so those that are even in the position to rent places are being given official residential bungalows. And those that are not in the position to rent places, the messengers, the clerks, and the rest, are called upon to rent places. I don't think that is good. And so, when I was the leader of Parliament in 2009, I changed the housing policy in Parliament. No member of Parliament who is a member of Parliament is living in government premises. I changed that. And what we did was just to give to each member of Parliament rent advance to rent places.
Yeah, that was also controversial.
Yes, but
because the law says that you can't pay more than 6 months rent advance, and you are giving members of Parliament rent advance in excess of that.
It's obeyed more in its breach. We passed that stage, you know. We passed that stage. You see, before that, when we had new parliaments, the members were put in hotels, and government was paying. In fact, the last time we did that was in 2005, where the hotels were paid minimum $60 a day, and the members stayed in the hotels over 1 year. We spent over 27 billion cedis on accommodation. When I did this change in 2009, we spent a little over 7 billion. That was serious savings for Ghana. Because, you see, by the law and conditions of service, a senior public servant at the end of your term of office is allowed to stay in your official premises for 3 months. After 3 months, you pack out. And then that house has to be conditioned for the new official coming in. And that depends on availability of resources. Once the resources are not available, then the new person will have to be accommodated somewhere. And who takes the cost? The state. Okay? So usually it takes about 1 year for you to have this changeover from the old to the new. And so what I simply did was to get the data from the clerk of parliament, the accountants, and then we did a memo to His Excellency the late President, Professor Mills. He went through it. He was so encouraged, said, please, leader, go ahead. And so he gave approval. We came back and implemented it. And we gave 2 years advance to each member of parliament to go out and rent a place. And we asked each member of parliament to leave the Sakmuna